Hello, hello. What's going on, people? Ooh, hold on one sec. Forgot to do some things. Gotta fix a couple of things. I forgot to do settings on this. But how you doing? A little late night, a little late evening. Found some time in the day, so figured it'd be a good time to just chat for a little bit here. One sec. Apologies. I need to fix it to subscriber only so that people have to actually commit. A little bit of slow mode. There we go. All right. There we go. Okay. All right. Oh, oh shit. Hold on. Sorry, I've just messed up my settings on this when I started. So give me just a sec here. Can we get a spreadsheet tracker of all potential ins and outs so we can go over it? I don't see why not. There we go. All right. We're okay. We're okay. We're okay. All right. I'm ready to focus. So yeah. Quite a few things. Am I still optimistic about the transfer window after Yakarez? Yeah, and it seems that story is a lot more to come than it seemed initially. So let's do that. I do want to explain my understanding of where things are at with Mbeumo, and it's not much of an update. Um, um, it's not much of an update at all, really. But all I can just continue to reassure everybody on is that it's still happening. Essentially, what you're seeing right now is that, you know, yeah, really what you're seeing right now is basically it's quiet because uh it's quiet because again a lot of people are away. A lot of people are away. A lot of people are doing other things, Club World Cup, vacation, holidays, things like that as well. And that kind of slows everything down, when it comes down to it. It really does slow things down. Um, and it's early still, right? And you have half the clubs over here at this Club World Cup, which is a little bit of a interesting. But that also means realize that also means like agents. That also means like, you know, I don't know how would I put this? Like that means agents, that means intermediaries, that means people involved in making deals happen are busy. A lot of them tied up with different things. You saw Mbeumo interview at the F1. Yeah, he was in Toronto. He was in Toronto, and so people are on holidays and at the World Cup and all of that kind of stuff, and so, kind of depends. It's a complete waste of time, the Club World Cup. Well, I would tend to agree. And that's part of the reason why it's slow, because it's just there's not a huge rush. We have about 3 weeks left, and we have about 3 weeks left until players are set to return, and so they have time to sort things out. They have time to figure things out. Um, they have time to get somewhere. You know, they have time to resolve things. And right now on Embumo, they're kind of okay with where it's at. They feel that Embumo is committed to them. They feel that there's no danger of other clubs. Again, as I said, that whole Spurs nonsense is just the game being played. And that they're ready to just kind of be calm, and ensure that they get what they need out of this. That they get the deal at the right price. Um, there really isn't anything that in particular sorts that is really going to change anything, on this front at the moment. Right now, there's nothing like they sign Mbeumo tomorrow. He won't be back and he won't be in and arriving for until July or anything like that either. So it's going to take some time still to come on this whole thing, basically. Let me just check on something here. So yeah, they're okay with it. I mean, that's all. I don't know. Um, 1 second. Just confirming something real quick here. Yeah, yeah. All right. So that's all really. I mean, that's all that's really happening on Embumo. They're gonna sweat Brentford a little bit to make sure that they pay a better fee for him, that they get the right fee for him, that they don't go over their valuation, and that they're willing, and that they're gonna sit on the types of prices that they are, you know, their valuations. They're pretty disciplined about that. They're pretty certain about that. Um, that's about it. They were always going to just kind of hold on this deal and make sure that they get the valuations that they need. But at the same time, that doesn't mean work is not happening. That doesn't mean work is not happening. It doesn't mean they're not working on everything else that's going on. We'll talk about strikers in a minute, but a huge part of what they're doing is obviously as well working on the sales. And this is the part where we're starting to actually see some progress overall. We're starting to see some actual improvement on this front where players are coming in for sale. So we can start with Sancho, obviously. The first thing with Sancho here is that we're starting to see a few inquiries come in because the question has been, where is he going to go? And the reality is that it's going to be really hard to move him in. There's no evidence that Mbeumo will change his mind or any suggestion that he would. Obviously, United have to get a deal done for him to do it, but there's really nothing to say that he will not stick with his original intention. So that's been the question. So Saudi, they've made some inquiries for Sancho. I don't know if you saw that from Sully. There was some talk of that last week as well, but there's been some inquiries from Saudi for Jadon Sancho. Well, if his money and the wages are the most important thing, then that's going to be what he gets, pretty much. And in addition to that, now we're seeing from Italy that Napoli are interested in him, according to DiMarzio. Now, again, I think that what we'll see there is a difficult one. I would suppose that a best thing that we could get from Italy is some type of loan fee with some of the wages covered, maybe a cheap purchase with some of the wages covered. And you know what? Quite honestly, I think United would take that at this point in time. I think that if Napoli were to come in for a deal with, I don't know, 10 million, 15 million on offer, and United had to pay off some wages and all of that, then so be it. Then I think that they would accept it. I think that they will do pretty much anything in order to move him on, frankly. And look, this is kind of the situation that we're in with a few players as well. There are no intentions to reintegrate them into the squad. Guys like Sancho, where Anthony is, where Rashford is, there's no real intention for them to come back and play. And they'll do what they need to move them on. So it's good we're starting to see more by way of inquiries for Jadon Sancho. And I think that, that's what's going to happen. Essentially, that's likely where we're at. And unfortunately, this is a consequence of course, the deals and wages that we've given out, paying high prices. Right now, we're struggling to a degree to move on. One in Sancho that we paid 72 million for on high wages. Anthony, 80 million high wage, deep, not super high wages, but moderate wages. So you can see why they're a little bit gun shy on and keeping a fairly disciplined approach to the purchases that we make when it comes to transfer fees. Because this is the problem that you have. If it doesn't work, what can you do? If it doesn't work, how do you move your players and things like that on? That is the challenge, and that's what they're trying to fix by being so disciplined on the spending, and why they're holding to the to the price and their valuations when it comes to players like Mbeumo, and being disciplined on it. Because look, Sancho, at least there's inquiries, but the reality is, at best, we're going to get some wages off for next year and a little bit of a loan fee, and then it'll be done, and we'll have more space in the next year from that. But it's starting to look like more is coming on Sancho, which is good. The next thing after that is I want to talk a little bit about that Onana situation. I've said before that I did not think it would be likely in the end that Onana goes. I remember in one video I said there are people who at the club who kind of like Onana. And that's pretty much what Luckhurst's report said, that he's unlikely to leave at this point. He said Amorim likes him. I mean, I can just tell you that is true from a personality standpoint. Amorim does probably like him. So, that's fair enough. But I think the more important thing on this, and the biggest reason, regardless, is because that's not the reason why, he couldn't be sold. The biggest challenge that we have with Onana is, again, price and fee. It's the price and the wages, the fee and the wages. That's the truth of the matter. And I'm talking about personality, but it's the truth. It's the wages and the price, it's the wages and the price. Onana would have to be sold for upwards of 30 million and over 150,000 in wages. And so I said, while we would be happy to move on both keepers at the end of the day, it's going to be hard to move Onana. And that's why he's unlikely to leave. It's going to be near enough impossible. So again, as I've been saying for some time, we want to get a competition for him, because factually that's probably all we can afford is competition for Onana. But moving him is going to be a real challenge. And that's been the case all year. Now, Newcastle are kind of struggling with James Trafford, because Burnley have gone up to 40 million on their budget, but on their cost for him, but I don't think we'll be going back in for him either. He'll probably just end up staying in Burnley at this point. Just another one of the other names that we had been interested in with regards to them. So we've really really don't have any idea what you're talking about. I'm just gonna yeet you again from the stream. You just keep saying shit. That's always been the case, is that it's going to be hard to move Onana. But yeah, we want keepers. But this is the problem. We're struggling to move the guys that we paid big fees for and big wages for. And that's why they want to be very disciplined in their approach. Because if that happens again, then we're really, really in trouble, right? We can't keep doing that. The guys that we've been buying have been generally on good wages and for good fees. I mean, if you look at our transfers last year, what were they like? 35 million, 40 million in terms of pounds, 35 million, 40 million, 17 million. Who am I missing? 50 million and like 40 million? Yeah. And then Dorgu was like 25 million. So we've kept our purchases from outside England to like 50 million and under in terms of pounds, right? I think Euro was the most expensive, 52 million or something like that in pounds, something like that. Ugarte, that's 50 million in euros. I'm talking about pounds. Euro was the most expensive. So Euro was like 52 million. Ugarte was 43 million. Maz was 12 million, Delict was 40 million, Xerxes was 35. So you can see that those are better. Now, why? All of those players, you buy, let's say Ugarte, all right, because a lot of people don't like him. All right, fine. Let's say after this season, you're looking to sell Ugarte. You bought him for 42 million pounds up front. You pay, after 2 years, you only need 20 million to break even on him, 24 million to break even on him. Someone will give you that money for almost any of those players. So it makes it a lot easier to move people when they don't work. Ugarte was 50 plus 10 in euros. 50 plus 10. People love to inflate it because they don't like him, but he was 50 million euros plus 10 million euros in terms of cost. So that's 42 up front plus 8 or so in add-ons. So point being, it's easy to shift these players. You get Xerxes. Well, after the season, let's say Xerxes doesn't work out, you only need to pay 20 million for Xerxes. Like, you're looking at all of these guys and saying we could sell them between 20 and 25 million after a couple of years. And point being, that's why that they are they're much easier to shift anyway. They're much easier to shift than others, even if it's no guarantee. Onana, he's got 40 something million remaining even after 2 years, you know. I'm sorry, but that's simply not. People would absolutely pay that kind of money for Ugarte. Just because United fans don't rate him doesn't mean other people don't as well. And it's the same goes for a lot of the players. Same goes for a lot. There's plenty of clubs that would pay 30 million for Delict if he was back on the market. They absolutely would. I promise you, there's a lot of people who would be interested at those prices, because a lot of these guys are proven internationals as well that we got that are that would now have decent fees. So that's why they want to maintain their discipline on the spending, so that if they turn around, especially guys who are outside of England, right? Selling players is hard due to wages. No, it is very much due to both. Højlund, the difficulty with Højlund and why we're probably going to have to accept a loan is specifically because you would have to get 40 million for him. Nobody's paying 40 million for him. Like, we have guys we want to shift 2 and 3 years into their contracts where we have to get as much as we paid for people last summer, you know? Yeah, it's just it's very, very different. So that's why they want to remain disciplined on these types of things. So that's what they're going to maintain. But the sales are finally moving a little bit. We have a little bit of progress on Sancho, not on Onana. Unfortunately, it seems like a lot more people are looking at it that way. Which sucks, but because there was some talk maybe of what do you call it? There was some talk briefly of Saudi, but there wasn't much substance to it, unfortunately. That was the real problem. So that's certainly an issue there. Antony is starting to move at the moment. Yeah. Betis came back in for him as kind of expected. They're looking at offers that include things like staged obligations. You loan, you get a fee up front. And then they buy, say, 15 million for half his rights next season, and then 15 million for the rest of his rights the following season. A deal like that is probably one United would take. I mean, if you think about it, you can essentially count that as a sale. If they were to somehow turn around and sell him next summer, you would get 50% of the fee on that. So that's a deal that seems like it's kind of moving. Again, the Betis talks happened. The offers are starting to kind of work it all out. That's okay. That's getting you towards the right angle. So that's fine. I think that it is getting somewhere. Like everything is slowly ticking towards potential sales, and at some point, you know, at some point it'll tick over and some of these things will actually come through. But in the meantime, a lot of stuff is getting lined up. So Sancho, there's getting some increase. Anthony, I think, is moving along not too badly at the moment. Højlund, the interest from Inter is still very, very real, but again, it's probably going to take a little while. The only other thing I would mention on the sales is we kind of saw this last year as well. There are some clubs that make deals before July 1st. And there are some clubs that are using the time before July 1st to balance their books, right? They're trying to raise money before July 1st, not spend money before July 1st, so that they can balance their books from a PSR standpoint. We saw the same thing last year where it was really quiet until July, and then in July, boom, knocked down like 4 deals in a sequence and started to get our moves done over the course of it. We've already got Cunha done and Mbeumo is most of the way there, but I do see it kind of going like that it's going to be a lot of slow progress over the next couple of weeks. And then clubs will start to move a bit more in July. The thing is on that is when you're buying players, it doesn't count too much against your PSR because it's all staggered. But when you sell, you get to count it right away, right? So if clubs are trying to balance the books, they're going to want to move their players on before July 1 if they can. They're going to want to minimize any spending if they're in that situation. And there's a fair number of clubs that are in that situation. There's quite a few number of clubs that are in that situation where they do need to balance the books. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see similarly to that by end of this month we have Mbeumo wrapped up, we have Cunha wrapped up, which is already a lot better. But then a lot of those things that are kind of lined up then can start ticking over a little bit quicker come July, especially as everybody starts to return and get into a rhythm of things. So the biggest issue is so Sancho, it's starting to move. Anthony's starting to move. Højlund is moving, but it's going to take a bit of time probably to get a serious offer in place from Inter on that with everything that they're working on. Garnacho is a problem. Garnacho is a problem. I genuinely don't think he'll be sold now. Like, that's just my opinion. Like, as an assessment of the situation, I don't see who will go for him. I think he's limiting his options. Joining Ten Hag at Leverkusen was the best deal on the table. Probably this whole summer was probably going to be the best deal on the table for him. That's going to be that's an interesting one. That's an interesting one. I truly do not know where or if he will end up somewhere, like, at all. I don't know what can be done about it. Chelsea, you can look at Chelsea today. Look at Chelsea today. They're lining up Fofana now. They're going for anybody but Garnacho. Napoli have fully moved on. They're talking about Jack fucking Grealish right now. Who's going to go for him? Who's going to go for him at this point? Especially at the money. Like, who is going to buy Alejandro Garnacho in the Premier League right now? And is it going to be a club that's big enough for him to accept it? I don't know. There's a world where we could end up having to loan him because, like, we don't know what to do here. Like, Spurs, maybe, but they're talking about Elanga, Semenyo, excuse me. Solanke's the guy they already have, obviously. Elanga, Semenyo, João Pedro to Newcastle. Like, I'm looking at all these clubs that are buying forwards, and none of them are moving for Garnacho. None. Who's remaining? Aston Villa, we talked about. They'd have to wait till probably July for what it's worth. And so maybe they'll come in for a deal there. And then what? What do they have to offer? Maybe they can offer 40 million at that time. I don't know. I really don't know. You know? Yeah, Newcastle won't unless Anthony Gordon goes. Arsenal are looking at Rodrigo. I right now I don't know that there's an offer on the table. If someone pops up and makes an offer suddenly, maybe, but we haven't even heard about interest. We haven't even heard anything concrete about like talks.
Ooh, calm down. Everything's okay.
Oh, is it doing the audio? I
I'm
didn't mean
sick
it
to
to.
death of Manchester United not fit
I
to
didn't
sell
actually
players
mean to
on a
have it turned
permanent.
on.
Just watch City get.
Just watch City get. Well, it would be nice. It would be nice if we could, but we have issues. We've got issues. City won't get 40 million for Jack Grealish though. City won't get 40 million for Jack Grealish. They won't. But we've got issues with wages. We've got issues with other things and such. Nobody's paying 40 million for Jack Grealish though. No, but look, like the fact of the matter is, like, there's no reports of anybody being in talks for him. They reported Villa, Spurs, and Chelsea were interested. I hear you, but Chelsea are going for other players. Spurs are going for other players, and there's been nothing of substance from Villa. So it's not really moving anywhere on that. I hope that tomorrow someone comes in and makes an offer. That would be great. But we're hearing noise on Anthony and offers potentially coming, noise on Sancho and inquiries and such coming in. We're hearing decent stuff on Højlund. We're not hearing anything on Onana or Garnacho that give us any sort of chance at moving them at the moment. And I just don't see how it's possible. I'm not saying we won't. The thing with Garnacho is that we don't owe anything. So I think some clubs are going to sit there and say, well, we're just going to put an offer in later on that you have to accept because we don't have anything else to do. The issue is, again, there's been interest, but he didn't want to leave the Premier League. So that limits it down to extremely low in terms of the options, which is why, like you said, Ruben called it, why he said you might be lucky. You would be lucky that someone would buy him. Because who's going to pay 50 million? Nobody. Rashford somewhat in the same boat in that respect, in that there's not a lot of clubs fighting for him, and he obviously wants to go to Barcelona. That's a challenge. There's no doubt about that. That is a challenge. So I don't know, man. I really don't. It's a very difficult situation to look at here. So yeah, I mean, not much we can do on that. So it's fine. We can move on these guys, but on like Sancho, I think Sancho, Anthony, and Højlund will probably go by the end. But I mean, I think Garnacho will go. I'm being a little dramatic on that. That's why I said it was my opinion. I think he will go in the end, but I think it's going to be a bit of a wake up call on like, hey, by the way, like the biggest clubs are not really coming for you, and you have to maybe accept something different. The reason I'm less on Rashford is that he accepted the Villa move in January on loan in the end. And he's not opposed to moving outside of Europe, England either. There will be other clubs that are interested in. There will be other clubs that are interested in what you call it. There will be other clubs that are interested in Rashford from outside there. Yeah. So, Rashford will probably move somewhere else, whether it's Barcelona or otherwise, later on. But, he's willing to take other moves. And so, it's not like he's going to refuse a bunch of transfers and such. I think he'll accept it, even though he's going to hope that Barcelona will come for him. Garnacho, as of now, turning down some serious moves is a worry. So those are the main ones I'm worried about. Those are the main ones I'm worried about. Those are the main ones that I'm worried about. So we'll have to see where it goes from there. That's the biggest issue. United have been more ruthless in getting these players out of means dropping that. They will. They will drop the asking price, Jason, for sure. The thing is like I wouldn't. They're gonna sell them at affordable fees. I'm not too worried about them about pricing these people out. You know what I'm saying? I don't think they're gonna price them out. I think they'll accept loan obligations for Anthony. I think they'll accept a loan with a fee and some wages covered for Sancho. I think they'll accept some basic stuff for Højlund, probably a loan plus obligation there too. I think they're okay with that. And I think our PSR position as such is where we don't have to get all the money in now. It's the best to get the wages off and the players moved. And that's going to be helpful. So they're going to be flexible on the asking price. The wages are definitely the bigger constraint here. I also think they're going to be flexible with the price on Garnacho. I think if 35, 40 million came in, they'd probably sell him for that. I don't think they would turn it down. But I think clubs are going to try to wait until, later on because they're trying to force the deal, which is unfortunate, but the reality that we're faced with there. So, from a sales perspective, I think the biggest thing again is that, yeah, we don't need to make a bunch of money from sales this summer. The biggest thing is we need to get wages off. And then the second biggest thing is we have to make Europe. Okay. If we can just get the wages off and know that we have these players moving away, that we have some sales lined up for next summer, some obligations, some things like that, some expiring deals like Sancho, Casemiro, all of that, it's totally okay. It's actually totally fine for that to be the case. We can do that. They can just whoosh, and we can let them go next summer and know that, hey, next summer we've got like 800,000 in wages departing the club and 30, 40, 50 million in obligations coming in. That's all well and good. That's fine. And if we can get those wages covered for this year as well, then we can do transfers because the PSR position is fine. Cash flow wise, it's going to be tighter, but I'm not particularly worried about it. From my read on things, yeah, we would have to borrow from the credit line in order to pay some transfers to do a bit more if we're not expecting an influx of cash now. But as long as we know we're making those savings and that cash in the future, that's okay, as long as we get Europe. Because the way that I look at it is like this. If we move Sancho, Anthony, Højlund on loan, Rashford probably on loan too, right? Not some of them with obligations and things like that. Sancho deal ends next year. Casemiro ends next year. A few players are a little more sellable next year. Then this year, we free up more wages. We buy a couple more players. Then next year, even more wages come off. A little more money comes in. And the cash flow is okay. We can start to pay down some of the spending that we spent this year ahead of next year. Now, the only thing that then Maguire's deal comes off too. Yeah. The biggest thing that matters at that time, like let me say it this way. We free up a little bit of money that we'd have to refill with wages on players we purchase. We use the cash from the credit line to buy the players this summer. Carry that balance to next year. Then we free up even more wages, get some money back. That allows us to pay it. But then it'll be tough to do more purchases unless we have Europe. If we get Europe, then we can expect a higher cash flow over the course of the season. So then we can do even more. So this all works. It's okay for us to be able to it's okay for us to be able to move people for loans, for obligations, for things like that for next year, so long as we can we get Europe. As long as we get Europe, then it's going to be fine, and then we will be able to invest next year. So we have to take it in stages, but I think that's why the goal is like Europe next year, right? That's what Omar said. That's where and that's just what we have to deal with. This is the consequence of all these crappy players that we've bought, and again, why they want to remain very, very disciplined on the purchases. So let's talk about strikers. But in the meantime, like the video. 1,100 people in here. You can. I'll put this poll up again. That seemed to help. Why this talk? Well, I'm just explaining that, like, because I've seen a lot of questions about things like, let's say, oops, I'm pinning the wrong thing. I've seen a lot of questions like, can we buy more players before selling? Can we do things like that, right? And the answer is it's a mixture, because it's not quite as simple. It's not quite as simple as can we buy without selling. The fact of the matter is, if we are in the process of moving some players on and freeing up some wages, we can, as long as the bigger question will be next summer. If we don't get Europe, then it's going to be a problem. But at the same time, Europa League would be fine financially. I'm not saying Champions League only. Europa League would be fine. So what I'm trying to get at is essentially the answer is yes, we can do more purchases without significant sales or before it. We don't have to get a bunch of sell money in. We don't have to. But the responsible thing is to understand that we ideally have things lined up in order for people to leave and to get more wages off. Because again, we have a bunch of more good, like you take Cunha and Mbeumo, like our 100 million budget we had this year. All right. Take that, for example. Why did we have 100 million? Okay. In our budget. The reason is we have 3 major free agent departures. Johnny Evans, Christian Eriksen, and Victor Lindelof. The wages they free up free enough of the wages for the players that we're signing. They freed up like 300 something thousand a week in wages. So those departures and some of the loans that we did saved us enough money to have a budget even when we missed on Europe entirely. And we sacked people during the year. Now, listen, next year we won't have Europe. So we had Europa League this year. Next year we won't have Europe. But we also have 200 more sackings that haven't taken effect until next year. So, unfortunately, but the reality is that it's another 50 million that's going to be saved next year on that, which essentially covers the loss of Europe financially. So next year, Sancho's wages come off 200. We have huge wages coming off next year. Sancho wage comes off 250. Casemiro 350. Maguire 200,000. That's a lot of wages. That's a lot of wages coming off next year. It's so much wages that if we also get Europe, we could spend pretty big. But we're going to have to be spending that money probably this summer to do Embumo, to do Yakarez or a striker or Ekit or whoever we buy this year is likely taking from some of the spending we could do next year, which is why it's so important we get into Europe. Otherwise, we're essentially stealing from next year's budget to do it. Understandably, because we're saving so much next year. We could buy another 125 million in players on 200,000 a week, basically, or 150,000 a week each with how much we're going to save. Like, we could do serious business next year, even without Europe again, with the wages that are going. But again, we need to spend now. So it's a little bit of both. What's he said here? Are you it says they've decided to activate it. 58 million. Okay, so they're trying. So yeah, obviously if they get Nico Williams, that would probably spell the end of Rashford to Barcelona fully, right? If that actually happens. But like I said, I think that Rashford would be willing to, in the end, move elsewhere on the continent, and on a loan or anything like that. So I'm less worried about his situation because he will be more open to move to other clubs and such. So, but we'll see where that ends up. So yeah, look, point being, we're stealing from next year a little bit. The more we can move off this year, the less we're stealing from next year. Either way, we need to get Europe in the season. So obviously, a big thing with that is yeah, a big thing with that is essentially the we need to get a striker in, right? And that's the next thing that we want to do is get a striker in. That's certainly the next thing that we want to do. So some of the sales are moving. I'm feeling better about that. I think it'll help. I think it'll help move things along. I think it'll help us get more of our signings in the door come July. Things are moving a little bit. Rashford to Dortmund. They did have an interest in him at one point. So I guess we'll see. There was definitely clubs in Italy that were also interested in him, at that point in time too. And that, may come back in for him as well. Again, I think that the fact that he's willing to go to other clubs matters. I think that does matter. Again, that's why I'm less worried about it. Because if he goes on loan and he goes to other clubs, then so be it. That's fine. So on the striker front, obviously, I said yesterday in a video, like I was rethinking after Saturday, after Saturday's whole rant against Yakarez, and I was thinking about it a little more, and I was like, it's not as dramatic as I thought it would be, as it seemed at the time, and it seemed like like the initial reports seemed pretty harsh. Like he refuses to join. And I was like, what the hell? From my perspective, the understanding was we pushed forward on the deal and he kind of was telling us he wants to wait to see what Arsenal do. But he's not rejecting us. It's pretty much identical to where Lenny Yoro was at last summer. We spoke to Lenny Yoro in January and he said he was prioritizing Real Madrid. We spoke to Lenny in June. He said he was prioritizing Real Madrid, waiting for Real Madrid. We spoke to Lenny in end of June and he said he was prioritizing Real Madrid. We spoke to Lenny in early July. He said he was prioritizing Real Madrid. And it took him till July 11th to get it done, essentially. It took us till July 11th to convince him, because Real Madrid never went in for him in the end. So it's pretty similar here. In my opinion, Arsenal are playing games with Šeško. Arsenal are playing games with him. Berta's playing the game that he does. Maybe they decide to go for him. I really don't think they will in the end. Just my opinion, my read on the situation. We only got Euro because the club forced him to be taken for the money. Correct. That's my point. We got Euro because we got the deal agreed. We are always second fiddle for Lenny and everyone knew it. But nobody ever said Yakarez preferred us over Arsenal. Never. Nobody ever said that. I think that we've all kind of ruled out Arsenal making the move because of all the Šeško talk. And so it was like kind of assumed, right, that. But I said many times, the reason we could get Yakarez is because he might fall into our lap. Because these other clubs have different targets and they're going for different people, right? That was always the case. Like it was always the case that if we were to get him, it was because he fell into our lap, because other clubs didn't get him and weren't going for him. I don't think anybody ever said he preferred us. I think we all just assumed it, right? So, and I agree with you on the sentiment. Like, I think we all assumed, not all, but I think the general sentiment was assuming that he had chosen us, but he never did. So it's always been like an open-ish race that he's been willing, and according to everything since then, um, yeah, we all assumed because Arsenal were going for Šeško, basically. That we all assumed, all right, then it's an open race and it's clear path for us and all of that. But Arsenal are dicking this whole thing around for sure and making a mess of it. So, it still seems sort of open here. And what's really abundantly clear is we haven't walked away from it. We haven't walked away from it. That much is for sure. United have not walked away from the Yakarez deal. They're it is painful, and it's because it's Arsenal, but they're not going to walk away from what they might view as the better target just for that. They're not going to walk away from it. They're going to say, one is because they don't have good alternatives. The main alternative, let's talk about that, is Ekitike. And obviously, Ekitike, I mean, we knew, obviously, for months, Ekitike was somebody on the list, right? And it seems like we went Delap, all right, Delap, best value for money. Then we moved on to Yakarez immediately afterward. So I think I look at it in the sequence like this. We were talking about Osimhen February and March, April, and then at some point it was like, all right, it's just not going to happen. So we move on from Osimhen. Then we looked at Delap and it was like, okay, then it's like, Delap is the best value for money, 30 million. We can afford him. Okay, we don't get Delap. We're kind of looking at Yakarez at the same time. And then Yakarez is like, all right, it's sort of in there. And the next alternative after that is Ekitike. And then I think you start going down the list to like real sort of stopgaps, right? Then you're talking about ones that they may not even want to buy once you get past Ekitike, like where they don't even rate them. Because make no mistake, like I want to make my feelings clear on this. I think Ekitike is a good footballer. In the same way that I thought Liam Delap is a good player. Liam Delap, the price made a lot more sense. I didn't want Delap because for me, I don't think he's good enough to lead the line at United. Not ready for that. But the value for money makes sense because then you could get another striker in. You could, because it's only 30 million. So it's good value for money. Yakarez or Osimhen is like your more permanent solution. Then you move on to like Ekitike. Now, the reason I'm not high on Ekitike is that is the price. 99% of it is the price. He's not a 70 million player. He's not an 80 million player. He's not even slightly that. Shouldn't ever be anywhere near that kind of price. If Delap was 60 million, we wouldn't have bought him. And it's the same thing, Hurst did not say Ekitike is 60 million. He did not. He said 60 million rated. That doesn't mean the asking price is 60 million. That's what I said. I said we're 40 million off of the price, basically. Like the club probably are looking at him in the 50 to 60 million range at most in terms of potential, and they're asking for 100. So you're talking about, all right, so that's in pounds. You're talking about a 35 million euros gap, nearly. Maybe it's 30 million euros gap. If we signed him and he started banging goals, people forget about the Arsenal comments pretty quick. Yeah, totally true. Halftime oranges. Look at the end of the day, someone starts scoring goals, nobody will care, right? There's a 30-40 million gap here, and like I said, they've spoken with the agent, right? I think that's been confirmed by pretty much everybody. There's an article from ESPN, from Times, and from Guardian, and from Fabrizio this morning. Does not say club contacts. We've spoken with the agent to understand the situation. So it's very basic at this point that we're looking into him as an option. He's been on our list for some time. But the fact of the matter is, we're so far off the price. And the problem here is that in any case, let's say they go down to 60 million in pounds, right? Guess what happens if it's 60 million in pounds? Liverpool bid, Chelsea bid, 100%. Both of those clubs will bid at 60 million. Both of those clubs will bid at 60 million, maybe a little bit more, because he's their top target. Both of them will. So I don't see a world where this transfer materializes in that respect. I just don't see how. If the price comes down 30 million pounds, then it comes to a more reasonable level. Then you're competing with Liverpool and Chelsea immediately. Yeah, I don't care about the United fan thing. It's an assumption that we make that players will choose us. It's not always necessarily true, because of that alone. Players will prioritize their careers. We don't know. I'm not saying he wouldn't, not saying he would, but we don't know. But then again, but I also have to say once again, that would be the initial assumption that Frankfurt will come down 30 million pounds, on their asking price, essentially. I don't see a world where that happens at all. And we haven't actually seen anything saying United are even willing to pay 60 million, as well. There's been nothing to say that either, even at 60. I still think 60 is way too much for any young player at the current point in time, because I just don't think they're that good. Yeah, Hoyland's a United fan. He watched a certain United channel for a long time. Like, the United fan stuff doesn't mean shit to me. I don't care if they're a United fan. Solskjaer was not a United fan, We've had plenty of legends that were not United fans. So, yeah, Kirkes is a United fan. He's going to Liverpool, Braithwaite is a Liverpool family, and he's playing at Everton. Like, it is what it is. But yeah, look, I mean, the fact is, sounds like you don't want him, so you're playing down the link. No, I don't want him at that price, but if you want to explain any other evidence to it, to suggest that it's any closer than that. The reports are we've spoken with his agents. That's the reality of it. We've spoken with his agent, and to assess the deal, and that's all it is at the moment, right? If we progress it, we'll see. At the moment, today, we have not progressed it. We've only spoken to his agent to get the terms of the deal. And I do know for sure the price will have to come down 30, 40 million from where it is for United to consider it. It's way above their valuation of him. Okay, that I can tell you for a fact from well, I shouldn't say for a fact, okay, because everything is always per my own information, and I don't claim it always to be 100% fact. So I shouldn't say it for a fact. What I should say is that's my information, that it's the price being quoted is between 30 and 40 million more than what United value the player at. So unless we are seeing evidence of that, then there's not much else to say about it until that point in time. But we haven't seen any suggestion that they will accept less. I think at most United would pay 55, yes, but I also 55 million pounds, but I also believe they'd want that to be structured. I'm not even saying that they'd be willing to pay 55, 60 million pounds up front. I think they'd also want it to be structured and have some add-ons built into that too. So there's a lot of complications with the deal at this point in time. Why I still don't think it'll happen. And as of yet, there's been nothing substantial on it because of the price, essentially. I would absolutely take him at 40, 50. Now, I would still have the same concerns about buying a young player. The same concerns of buying a young player. In all fairness, you never said Yakarez favored us. That's true. I never did, because I've never heard that to be for sure the case. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see if they come down on the price, but I just don't see why they would when they have so much competition. You know what I mean? Like Fabrizio was saying, Liverpool are like right there on it. We've seen they're willing to spend big money. He says essentially they're looking to sell Darwin Nunez, and when they sell Darwin Nunez, then they'll go for Ekitike. So I believe that Liverpool are probably in the front seat for him at the moment. I just believe that that's probably the case. But obviously, United are here. So let's see if they move forward on it this week. But for anything to make sense, we would have to hear that the prices, total package would have to be 60 million, basically, for this to have any sort of reality in occurring. And so, yeah, we'll see. There's no bid, there's no offer, there's no direct negotiations with the club. If they open them, I'm sure somebody will report it. But for now it's a ways below. They sold Marmoush for 70. Yeah, they sold him for 70 million euros. And he's a better player than Ekitike, more productive. So in terms of value, I would say that should put Ekitike at most 60 million euros as a total package, in my opinion. That would be more sensible. So we'll see if they're willing to budge on that. Even then, obviously, I would still personally have my concerns over the deal, just on the fact of a young striker, and it has nothing to do with Højlund. I've said this before. I did a whole video on it, on the whole issue, the amount of pressure that it takes. So, to succeed, not just at United, but as a number 9 at a big club, it's difficult. Ekitike had a rough time at PSG. He had a rough time at PSG. I do find it a little hypocritical, that whole discussion, because I think it was 3 weeks ago, people were clamoring about how bad it was that we bought a PSG cast off in Ugarte. And I see a lot of the same people clamoring for a PSG cast off in Ekitike, who was frozen out by the club and Enrique. I've never agreed with that sentiment. I just find it very hypocritical. I just find it very hypocritical. But look, my other concern is that, after a season of players who can't finish their chances, I don't particularly myself want a striker whose weakness is finishing. I want a guy who is a bagsman. I want a guy who just takes half chances and turns them into full chances. That's just the way that I view football in general. That's just the way I view football in general. From the striker position, we all have different tastes. That's just my opinion on the matter. It's just my opinion on the matter. But I will say another thing. I do find funny. There's so much love for Liam Delap out there from United fans for some reason after he turned us down still. What are you guys doing? He turned us down. Why you guys loving on Delap? It's very strange. At the same time, what is also funny is Liam Delap. Liam Delap, okay? And this does crack me up. Liam Delap is basically baby Yakarez, which is why I very much understood why he was being targeted as well as Yakarez. Liam Delap is baby Yakarez. Like he's literally a Yakarez light. And I think that the fact is that 99% of people have not watched Yakarez in the Portuguese league enough to actually notice it, but they're really similar. Yakarez is just a lot better. They're really similar. Højlund is not that dissimilar either, to be clear. No, Højlund is something else. I don't know what Højlund is anymore. In an ideal world, Højlund was similar, but his development has gone backwards. But in the original sense, Højlund did look like that kind of player. He did look like that kind of player. So, we'll see. His development has gone so far backwards. Like in his first season, he was decent at running the channels and such, but just not so great. But then had to develop a lot more, and instead his development's gone the wrong direction, unfortunately. But I do find it funny. I'm just kind of amused because I sit there and I watch, Yakarez, and I think like this is also the thing that throws me a little bit on the whole deal. Like one of the reasons I don't like it. Like my opinion on recruitment is, of course, that there should be continuity. Where you know what I mean? Like if you want something, all of your targets should be the same. Osimhen, Delap, Yakarez are all really good at a certain thing. Ekitike is a very different player to all three of them. Osimhen is good at everything, so it's sort of off that. But Delap and Yakarez are pretty much the same player stylistically, in the way that they run, carry the ball, all of that kind of stuff. And Ekitike is very different, very, very different as a footballer, a very different style. So I don't like seeing the team go from one type of player to a totally different type of player. Because it doesn't make sense to me for the targeting of what you're wanting to do. What Embumo wants, which was heavily briefed. Yes, I know you keep sharing that, but I don't think it's. I think your people are taking journalists a little bit too literally on certain things, on that. I think people are taking journalists a bit too literally on that. When people first read it, they said that United wanted to pay 60, and then anyway. Point being, that's not the price. Regardless, what I'm saying is that it was fully briefed through like Laurie at the Athletic and things like that, and then that he wanted somebody who was running the channels, endlessly running the channels, hardworking. And Carl Anka did a good piece that he was very annoyed by people taking it and running with it as a aggregator, as like a transfer piece, because it wasn't. It was analysis, right? But he was right. He's totally right. If you read Carl Anka's piece from this morning, he's totally right about what a Ruben Amorim striker looks like. And I love his suggestions, almost all of them, frankly. When you look at his article, I love his suggestions because to me, Carl Anka's article looks like he's somebody who's actually watched Amorim and actually watched Sporting when he writes that piece, and you say, oh, that's what he wants. You know what I mean? Like he's like that's what he wants. Okay, that makes sense. That's what he wants. That I got it. So he names Victor Osimhen as the best player essentially. Then Victor Yakarez is one who fits. Now he says Jonathan David. Look, Jonathan David is a good fit. I just don't rate him as a player, but that's fair enough. He names Mateta, who I do think is a good player that would fit as well. And then he mentions Aghawa. Well, those are a lot of the names that I would like too. And they all fit quite well, and he kind of explains why they fit quite well. And then he names some others like Gonzalo Ramos and things like that, right? But I think it's kind of funny. I think it's kind of funny. But Delap is nothing like he is. He actually very much is. But like I said, I don't think people watched Yakarez play in Portugal. And that's why I just find it very dismissive. Like when it's just kind of funny. It is funny. They are really, really quite similar in their strengths. They're both very powerful finishers who are very good running with the ball at their feet. They're very good running into the channels and the spaces. They're very good picking the ball up and driving with it. Those are their strengths, where Yakarez has a bit more experiences in the box, in a more possession-heavy team. And he runs more than anybody else. But they are quite similar in their strengths and what they do together. But they're a very particular type of striker. Ekitike is not. Ekitike is not the same type of guy who's going to be constantly running at the back line, into the channel. That much is for sure. So they're very different. They're very, very different. Yeah, if you watch Yakarez at Coventry, you will see Delap. You will see a very, very similar player. Yeah, absolutely. You will see a very similar player. So I didn't want Delap in particular because I just didn't want a younger, unproven player, and I think that I just have that personal concern over anybody coming into United. But Ekitike is, I'm not going to say he's like Xerxes, but he's closer to Xerxes than he is to Delap, like profile-wise. He's much closer to Xerxes than he is to Delap. And that's not the profile we were going for. That's not the profile we were going for. So it's just different. It's just a different type of player. That's all. Where do I put Watkins stylistically? Closer to the same. Closer to the Yakarez Delap land. Not exactly, but closer. Closer to it anyway. He's a powerful runner who, you know, is quick and all of that. But yeah, when we've got guys like Cunha and Mbeumo, for me, you want a guy pressing the back line. I know I'm not the only one who shares that opinion, because I've watched a lot of Carl Anka, who I really do like a lot of his analysis, and he said the same thing kind of a few times. The type of striker you really want with those guys is somebody running at the back line regularly, endlessly, pushing and stretching the defense down there. So, you know, but it's cool. It's just opinions. It's all just opinions. I've got mine. I will say that the only thing I don't like is too many opinions when people haven't actually watched people. And that's the only part that I get bored of the discussion on some players is, like, I know for a fact that nobody I ever speak with has actually watched that much Portugal. Because if you actually go talk to the people who, like, if you talk to Portuguese fans and Sporting fans, they will tell you Yakarez is the best player they've ever seen at their club. And is a very different, you know, than what people will say. And they've had good players come through Sporting, okay, including Bruno, you know, and they'll tell you a very different view on him. And when people actually watch players more often, then it's different. But regardless, it's whatever. Let's see what happens this week. Let's see what happens this week on the deal. Let's see, do we open talks over Ekitike with the club? Do we get anything different on, you know, from Frankfurt in terms of the availability on price? Then what happens when it comes to, you know, when it comes to like Liverpool and Chelsea? Do they go back in for him if the price does come down? You know, all of that. Yeah, Yakarez is very good for Sweden, but I don't make too many comparisons to that. Ekitike and Isak comparisons at a ceiling, but, like, I think people are just comparing them because of their frame for the, like, there's a funny thing that happened. There's a funny thing that happens again here, right? Like, you know, like, people looked at Holland and said, "Oh, Højlund, there's a big Scandinavian running brute force player who's going to work because Holland worked, and there's some similarities and people connect dots that aren't dots necessarily." And I think people do the same thing because it doesn't work that way. Like, Isak has nothing to do with Ekitike. You understand what I mean? Like, they're two totally different people. They have nothing to do with each other. Just like Højlund has nothing to do with Ekitike. Like, Højlund failing isn't why Ekitike will fail. Højlund failing for big money isn't why. Højlund failing for big money is a symptom of a problem that happens when you buy young players for enormous fees. And it's a totally different kind of discussion. You know, but, like, there's too many people want to compare things together, you know? That's just the way I see it. Like, we're good at pattern recognition. Like, of course there's similarities between lots of different players. But, like, for instance, Delap and Yakarez are a lot more similar than Isak and Ekitike for me. But people won't see that either. So it is funny. It is like that. It's a much more apt comparison. I do the same thing, obviously, as well. But it doesn't. But again, I didn't take that to mean Delap will become as good as I think Yakarez is. That's the only difference. Like, I don't think because they're similar. I don't think because they're similar that means Delap will become that good. You understand? They could just have some similar skill sets, but becoming a great player is a lot more than just having the skill set. There's so many different things and pieces that go into it. But yeah, so Sancho stuff moving a little bit. Anthony stuff is moving a bit. Højlund stuff is moving a bit. Rashford, Garnacho, and Onana very, very shaky, with, I think, Onana the least likely to go. Garnacho not that different. And then Rashford will probably go somewhere else in the end. Yeah, I get similar profiles. What I'm saying is that the comparison of like a player to become like another one or to succeed because they have a similar profile, there's no connection there. That's the point I was actually trying to make. Like players can have similar profiles and it doesn't mean they're going to be successful because they have a similar profile, you know? It it's virtually meaningless. Højlund had a similar profile to Erling Haaland in a much worse version. you know, um, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like their profiles can match, but that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that player will work because there's all the intangibles, there's the mental aspects of the game, there's fitting into the team, there's development, there's all sorts of things that determine whether a player meets their potential. There's so much more to it than that. So the sales are kind of working. The sales are kind of moving along a little bit, slowly going forward and being lined up. We're ready to be patient on Mbeumo, and we're ready to. We'll see what happens this week on Ekitike. For now, it's just with the agent, but we're still keeping up on Yakarez. I do think that we need to put some kind of I do think we need some kind of like deadline on Yakarez. But at the same time, I guess why would we do that? Are you curious? Do you want me to put I think most, I mean, look, I don't think this is necessarily a representation of reality because people do somewhat tend to gravitate to people whose opinions match their own. Here, let me do it like this. Let's assume you could get Yakarez at 60 million or Ekitike at 60 million. What would you pick? But I think that, I mean, people disagree with me plenty, but we'll see on this. What word? What did I just say? I can't remember anything that I say like 5 seconds later. Oh, wow. The lap is very much like, yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I was thinking we should have a deadline, but I don't think we need a deadline. Like, why would we have a deadline? Because if you take him off of the market, then we have no options. Then we're screwed. Oh, deadline. Oh, got it. Yeah. Then we're really screwed if we put a deadline on it. If it doesn't happen. I think that by July though, we should push United need to push on one of the strikers to get something done or move on by like July 1. Yeah. Or I mean, like I said, I think people gravitate towards people who agree, but 75% or so, 73% on this side. Yeah, before camp, yeah. I know, James, I know. And don't get me started on people hyping up performances against LAFC, but writing off performances against Portuguese defenders. Don't get me started, man. Don't get me started. I do find football discussion fairly frustrating. We all have our hypocrisies and our opinions and things like that, but I tend to find myself on the certainly on the, I don't know, the counter popular side of things pretty regularly, which is totally fine. I have no need to be on the in the masses. But but some things drive me absolutely crazy. I look at them and I'm like, like I said, the PSG cast off thing. Like I think people just sometimes say stuff to be, I don't know. What's your serious opinion? What level? I'll be honest with you. I think Yakarez is still more likely than Ekitike as it stands. Mostly because there's such a huge gap on the evaluation of the player. Like if Yakarez says yes to us, we'll get a deal done. You know what I mean? It's closer. Rating Ugarte ruined my rep. I don't care. I think people are wrong who call with the way that they say him. I think I have actually a really balanced take on him. I go very over the top defending him. I go very over the top defending him because he gets so much hate. I think my take is probably a lot closer to the more balanced one, which is that he's very good at something that he does that is valuable to us at this point. And I've said probably 100 times that in the long run, he's probably a depth player for us for sure. But yeah. Why are we still there for Ekitike? Well, we don't have a ton of options. And he is a good player that we rate. So I think that's it. What are my pro Ekitike thoughts? Sure. I think he's a good player. Like, I think he is a talented player. He's obviously a skilled footballer. Like, let's look at it for example. I really like Xerxes. Okay? Like, I really like Xerxes as a player. I think Ekitike is similar with the potential to maybe be a little bit better than him. Right? And I think he's a good player. And like if you were to ask me if you could get Ekitike for 30 million and a striker and sell Xerxes and sell Højlund, would you do it? I would say yes in a heartbeat. But it's the circumstances more than the player. I'm not a hater. At all. You know? I'm not like I don't hate the player. I have concerns because of his experience at PSG. Affect, you know, he had there were articles that he was struggling with his mental health due to what was going on at PSG. This isn't like a criticism, but this is a reality. The pressure at United is worse. The pressure at United is worse, you know what I mean? And it's already bad enough. And people already fail at United so much. And we already ruin players mentally. Guys who have had some difficulty with that kind of pressure in the past, I think would find it really hard at United. So it's the circumstances that bother me. I think the player himself is good. Liverpool interested in him as a decent sign, as a decent player. How about Nunez? Should we get Nunez then? Yeah, he is that guy. Like I'm not. It's not a criticism. It's rough. It's rough. It's very, very rough. I think project players are difficult, you know? Like I thought Delap would come and he wouldn't flop. He's in the Premier League. He kind of knows it. He's been around it. And so I figured Delap would come in and be an upgrade on Højlund, but for me, not good enough. That's different. There's a serious potential, I think, for a player like Ekitike to flop. Like seriously flop, have a really rough go of it. But it is what it is. So, yeah, I mean, I guess we will see on it. But you asked for positives. That was my positives on it, really. That was my positives is that I think he's a good footballer. Like that's not the question for me. That's never really been the question for me. Is like, is he a good footballer? And could he get better? The problem is it the right fit for United? And look, the three major concerns, if I were to say it, is one, he's not the right stylistic fit for what Amorim wants. He's not. He's too expensive and he's too young. That's all. As a footballer, he's really good. Like, there's plenty of players I'd like to have at United if you remove the circumstances from it. Ekitike would be one. There's a lot that I would like to have at United if you take away the circumstances around it. And if it doesn't work, then you're really screwed if you do that. So that's the main concern. But all right, let's leave it there. Let's end it there. It's late. It's past midnight. I don't think you know better than the board. Well, I don't think I know better than the board either. But the board also really wanted Yakarez. I've never claimed to know better than the board. That's the difference. That's the difference. I don't ever claim to know better. That's why when they say, hey, we want Yakarez, I'm like, cool, that makes sense. I get it. Ekitike, I get why they'd want him, but I also get why they value him 30, 40 million below his price. You know? So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But like I said, that's why I think it won't happen. It's because the valuation is much below the price. So we will see. All right, we're gonna end it there. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out this evening. It's past midnight over there in the UK. It's past 5 here. I gotta end it. Appreciate you guys. I'll be back tomorrow with something. Not sure what. We'll see if I can follow up on some of these things and if there's any progress moving forward.